action with the government. So in as much as isa sa mga issues that are being mentioned now that there was possible corruption. So tatanungin ko po kayo, and you may answer directly, did you persuade, induce, or influence any official, whether PSDBM or anyone, to perform an act constituting a violation of the rules and regulations, including perhaps dito yung to make sure that this particular award will be given to you?
No, Mr. Chairman, I did not influence anybody in this matter.
Did you offer any gift, present, share, percentage, or benefit to the people that you transacted with?
No, Mr. Chairman, we did not provide any form of gifts or in a way.
Or any percentage or share from your company?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Or any form of entertainment?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Did you cause any undue injury in this particular regard to the government because of the fact that you transacted with the government? Was there any undue injury caused to the government?
No, Mr. Chairman. I believe we always offered the best price offer that we can proceed, and it's to my intention that our price has always been the lowest in this regard.
Could you honestly say that this transaction that you entered with the government was not disadvantageous or grossly disadvantageous to the government?
No, Mr. Chairman, it is not disadvantageous to the government, in my opinion.
Did you offer any interest or in your business to the people that you transacted with?
No, Mr. Chairman, we did not offer any kind of any of that.
So can you honestly say that you did not induce any public official to commit any of the offenses defined, as I mentioned previously?
No, Mr. Chairman, we did not do any of those.
Thank you, Mr. Huang Chuyan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Klaro naman po na binabanggit ko po kanina, malinaw po, Mr. Chair, na itong mga batas na ito, despite bayanihan po yung ginagamit po natin, applicable po ito. But, klaro rin po dito, in order for this particular law to apply, dapat yung elements that are being mentioned here should be present. And no less than the resource persons, Mr. Chair, ang tinanong po natin at kinonfront po natin, and we understand and we believe that they are under oath nung sinabi po nila yung kailang mga sagot. At klaro po, lumalabas po, Mr. Chair, yes, maaaring babanggitin po ng mga iba na ito ay nag-apply. Totoo po yun, nag-apply itong mga batas po nito. Subalit, ibang katanungan, iba ring usapin kung mayroon bang paglabag na naganap o nangyari sa pagitan po ng formally at ng gobyerno dahil po sa transaction pong ito. Subalit, lumalabas po, Mr. Chair, klaro rin po that there was no corrupt practices of public officers based on the questioning or that we undertook or we made with respect to the persons involved. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to ask my questions.
Thank you, Congressman Salon. First round is over. Next to interpolate for the second round is Deputy Speaker Marcoleta. You have the floor, sir.
Salamat po, Mr. Salamat po, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I have a few questions to the Chairman of Parmali, Mr. Huang.
Yes, President, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Huang Chu, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
You are a businessman, Mr. Huang.
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Chairman.
And I'd like to believe that young as you are adept in making decisions in order that your business will succeed. Is my assumption correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I always do my best in this.
When you offered to help supply the needed medical supplies of our country, specifically during April and May 2020, did you realize that at that time, most countries and most people are scampering, even quarreling to get the needed medical supplies to address the pandemic?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think with COVID that happened at the end of 2019, I think everywhere around the world there was a scarcity in the supplies. And when we saw that the situation, the COVID, unfortunately has come to the Philippines in March in 2020, we saw that as there will be a wide scarcity in the supply as well. So we, me and my corporate officers together, we looked up actively from all countries to supply this.
Thank you. And as a businessman, you realize that every business probably in relation to the supply of medical equipment or supplies needed to address the pandemic, we are experiencing what we call a seller's market. Do you understand that?
Yes, definitely. In the months of March and April, there was definitely a huge imbalance to the sellers market, where whoever has the supplies will be advantageous in this kind of negotiations.
Yes, because a seller's market is a condition where there are more buyers than sellers.
That is correct, Mr.
Do
Chairman.
you confirm that?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Chairman.
And it so happened because of the scarcity of supply, we were quite lucky that we were able to get from Farmally at the time those supplies are most needed. Is it correct?
Mr. Chairman, as a local corporation, Farmally Pharmaceutical Corporation really put the supply of the Philippines as a top priority in that respect. You know, there was a lot of requests for the supplies elsewhere as well, but I thought as a duly local corporation, we need to address this supply by the government of the Philippines as a priority.
Yes, and at that time, you know that our requirement for these medical supplies is huge. Huge enough that a company like yours will always rely on your friends, on your linkages, on your contacts, so that you will be able to honor your contract to the government. Is that correct?
Yes, we never denied that we are a small company, and to make good of our obligations to the government, we would have to use all our resources on the supply side so that we can meet the obligation, so that we can be rightfully compensated and not be blacklisted in any of these transactions.
Yes. And is it unusual for a company, a relatively new and small company, to ask help from friends? Is it unusual?
I believe that is really what we wanted to do. We just want to make good of our obligations, and we did not feel any shameful to ask for helps to deliver, because these things are critically needed to help with the battle of COVID. So we did not think there's any in that manner. So we did ask for helps to supply for these things.
So actually what you are saying is it is not wrong to ask help, because that is the legitimate thing to do if a huge supply is to be delivered to the government of the Philippines. And if at the time you needed help and you asked the help of some people, you did not consider that entirely wrong, because that is supposed to be done by a legitimate company like yours. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I think in context, regardless of how big or how small companies, every company asks for help from financial institutions, from suppliers, and especially in the case of a small company like us, we really seek the help to make good of these contractual obligations, definitely.
Sometimes you need to go to banks. We call that financial leverage. Sometimes you go to friends, even personal friends, if that is what it takes in order to honor and comply with your contract with the government. Is that not correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So instead of congratulating you, what happened is you are being condemned because you ask help from your friends. But the records stand. You were able to supply the much needed medical equipment and supplies that my country needed at the time they are supposed to be there. Because nobody except Farmally was able to supply. What do you feel? What do you feel
Mr. Chairman, I don't think we really needed any congratulations. I think as a company, what we really wanted, besides, of course, to do business, is also to help out with the situation. I have to tell you, when the first Senate hearing came out and then all this mass news, all these allegations about the company, I felt very disheartened because my staff, especially Grisel Margo, was actually in the fields. We could have did nothing, stayed at home, but my staff was in the fields, in the customs, in the warehouse, delivering these things exactly on time so that they can reach the government and to those people in need. So I felt very bad that we are branded as such. We don't need any recommendations or things. We just want to make good of what we did. And so I just felt a bit emotional at that point in time. But if there's any clarification, of course, we are willing to cooperate to clarify. But we just did our part. I think that's the main answer I want to give. We did our part, whether indirectly to help with the COVID situation, I believe.
Thank you for that answer. You did not need any congratulations, but I think you have expected at the very least that our people should at least be grateful to what you did.